Well, good evening and Sai Ram. And I'd like to offer my humble pranams at the lotus feet of my beloved Lord, Bhagavan Sri Sathya Sai Baba. It is great to be back here at the Hollywood Sai Baba Center, a center that is so passionate about doing beautiful volunteer work and singing God's many names so sweetly in this beloved church. It's wonderful, really lovely. I'm going to start with the words from a very famous devotee of God who once said, "I will always do whatever you tell me to do." That person was Arjuna, the famous warrior devotee of Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna knew that Arjuna was ready for doing the Father's work. And so Krishna said to him, "Give up all your confusions and all other allegiances and do my work, and I will free you from all binding consequences." Baba has said to us so sweetly, "Be my friend. Walk with me and be my friend." For me, it took quite a lot of time, many years, for the stunning realization that God can be a friend, talking to us, walking with us. And that's changed my perception of God completely. A fellow devotee once shared a Sai story with me about a devotee who sold all his possessions so that he could go to a faraway country and start an orphanage. And as this devotee did this, he was able to get divine instructions in his meditations every evening, where to build the orphanage, how to build it, and so on. The story really captured my imagination. In fact, it took hold of me, and I immediately knew that this is exactly what I wanted for myself. I wanted the same thing for me. I also wanted to be like Arjuna and say openly and honestly to God, "I will always do whatever you tell me to do." And I think this must have been a very funny and interesting moment for Baba. He must have thought this was quite hilarious, because when you say to God, "I will always do whatever you tell me to," that's when the testing really begins. Discipline, as it turns out, really is a big deal. And it's known that by maintaining to a strict time for namasmarana or recitation of the Lord's name, that is the most beneficial for a devotee. And I personally have been on the receiving end of Baba's humor and guidance in this area. Many years ago, I'd been trying to start the habit in my personal practice, spiritual practice, to do namasmarana each morning at 4 a.m. Prime time to talk to God. As one might imagine, it didn't take long for my ego and my monkey mind to kick in and tell me that what I really needed to do was to stay in bed, as I could just as easily commune with God with my head comfortably on the pillow. But Baba, my constant companion and guide, was not having it. And at exactly 4 a.m., my cell phone, which I had left by my bed, started ringing, which forced me out of bed with a jolt, as you can imagine, and the caller ID showed an indecipherable string of numbers. And I knew in my heart of hearts that this could only be Baba. But even with this experience under my belt, my monkey mind was not going to give up that easily. In fact, it convinced me that some sound sleep would actually help me pray better later on in the day. At exactly 4 a.m. the next morning, I was jolted out of bed yet again by another string of indecipherable numbers. Baba, my loving teacher, was not going to give up on me. He made it very, very clear in terms that I could understand that discipline must be adhered to. At that time, I'd also been sitting down in front of the altar each evening to pray before going to bed. And again, as you can imagine, there came a day when I said to myself, let's just skip prayers altogether. Why not? And I took a flying leap through the air. It was a leap that would have looked very cool in slow motion, though I had already turned the lights off. And I lay there in peace and darkness, enjoying my ability to call my own shots, to do my own thing. But much to my shock and horror, a light turned on, seemingly by itself. And I sprung out of bed and ran out of the bedroom, thinking that someone had snuck into the house and turned the light on. Of course, I quickly realized that it was just me. I was alone. It was just me and Baba. And you can guess who turned on the light. Baba says, when talking about discipline and prayer, he says, a fashionable excuse that is structured out by those who do not like this discipline is a want of time. It does not need any special time or extra allotment of time. It can be done always, whether you are bathing, eating, walking, or sitting. All the hours now are spent in gossip, in watching sports or films, or in hollow conversation. It can be best used for silent contemplation of the name and the form and the splendor of the Lord. Learn this lesson from Prashanti Nilayam and return better equipped to your places. If you fail to learn this, then you've wasted only your money and your time coming and staying in Prashanti Nilayam. So for me, right from the very beginning of my time with Sai Baba, I paid special attention to everything that he said a devotee of God should do. Baba has said that every devotee needs God's grace, a constant supply of those wonderful miracles that smooth out the bumpy road of life. And who wouldn't want that? Baba says, the best and fastest way to obtain God's grace is to serve mankind. There's a Baba quote I'm going to share with you. It's called Eternal Joy Through Service. Baba says, if you lift a hand to serve, to help, to console, to encourage another man, you're lifting it for God, because God is in every man. Be of service to others, for that is giving yourself to me. For whatever you give, I will repay you thrice. Nay, I shall repay you tenfold. Try me, and you will see. I say to those who know the joy of giving, look back. Yes, look back and see how each time you felt that nothing but a miracle could save you, keep you alive, fill your larder, save your son, stop a disaster, has that miracle not happened? Divine guidance is always on the side of the giver. Yes, I will give to those who give of themselves, untold joy and bliss, and what is more, I will lead them by the hand along those petal-strewn paths of eternal joy. Every deed performed, do it in my name. Every person who passes near your path, give them the sweetness of your smile. Give freely of the nectar of your cup of happiness, of kindness, of blissfulness. Give the warmth of your love. Extend your hand as I extend mine to you. And this is Sri Sathya Sai Baba, taken from the Sanatana Sarati in 1966. I can tell you that this has been very, very true for me. The more volunteer work I do, the more grace shows up in my life in the form of leelas and God's miracles. And I think Baba wanted to prove this point to me very clearly. After doing seva consistently for only a short time, I found that accomplishing things that were usually impossible became normal. And a good example of this was in my professional life. I had the job of a salesman, and prior to knowing Baba and doing seva, I rarely had any sales success at all. It was quite a miserable experience. Once I knew what the value of seva was and started spending all my free time doing volunteer work, Baba came to me in a dream, in which he made it very clear that when it came to selling, there was not going to be any more problems. And so from that day on, my sales quota was something that I could achieve. I still had to work like everyone else, but the unseen obstacles had been removed. Another example of receiving God's grace was when I had to travel to a far-off city. It was a business trip, a 3-week training course, and I arrived at the airport feeling rather alone and quite lonely. And in my mind, I said to Baba, "It would be so nice if you would tell me that you love me." Now, I know that that is a very tall order, especially when you're standing next to a crowded luggage carousel in Atlanta International Airport. At that exact moment, unbeknownst to me, a large, heart-shaped red metallic balloon had drifted over to me, hovering about an inch above my head, with the words, "I love you," written across it in big letters. This took my breath away. Nothing is impossible for God. In my daily sadhana, or spiritual practice, I like to remind myself, I belong to Him. I am His. And Baba says, if you think I belong to Swami, then Swami becomes free to look after you and bring you spiritual progress. It is all a matter of humility and your attitude. Accept everything as God. God is everywhere, in everything. True realization of the omnipresence of God will knock out your ego, which it stands in the way of surrender. And so, for me, the idea that God is my friend is always, and that He's always looking out for me, that's something that keeps me going. And there are times when I just don't feel like, volunteer work, and my ego wants to do something different. My ego wants to be entertained, to take it easy. After all, it's my personal time. I want to call the shots, rather than letting Baba run the show. And this is where my ego challenges my devotion. Baba says the greatest obstacle on the path of surrender is egoism and mindness or possessiveness. This is buried in your personality since ages, sending its tentacles deeper and deeper in every succeeding life. I have to be completely honest with you and tell you that my ego has the capability of being very, very sneaky. If it can find a way to rationalize putting off my spiritual progress, it will. Keeping my ego in check is part of my day-to-day spiritual work. And I have to be very careful to always stay mindful of what my ego is up to, because if I don't, I'll usually end up like Hanuman did when he was helping Rama with this great little story from Baba about the ego. Ego plays all sorts of tricks in order to get its unholy pleasure. During the construction of the bridge to Lanka to take the army across, Hanuman heaved a boulder across the raging waves of the sea as part of the bridge. It floated. Rama heaved another, and it sank. Hanuman's ego was tickled. Naturally, he laughed in derision, and that very moment, his boulder sank, and the boulder that Rama had thrown rose from the bottom of the sea and floated. Hanuman's ego was pricked to nothing, and that was the purpose for which Rama had willed that his boulder would sink. Our Baba is so very good at making sure that we learn humility and that our egos get destroyed. And it's not a fun process. It's really quite painful at times. But Baba does this out of his immense love, which can be very hard to understand, particularly when, for example, my ego is attached to things like my status in life, my job, my level of success. And Baba knows exactly what modifications to make to keep us humble and make us humble. Baba says, to remove your or anyone else's ignorance is entirely dependent on my will. Only when the appropriate time arrives, I will take away your ignorance. Not at your will, but mine. I prefer your unwise state. It is particularly pleasing to me. For me, it is a novelty. Children think, why doesn't my mother feed me more food so that I can grow up quickly? But the mother is fully aware of exactly how much they should be fed. And then again, the mother derives a peculiarly unique joy in her child's lisping speech, its play, its tears of love, and its invariable habit of disturbing and upsetting her. The mother revels in the child's precious childhood with loving pleasure. It is her right. Similarly, you are my ignorant child, and I shall keep you in ignorance. If you become wise, you will grow up far too quickly. I do not wish it. I'm not implying that I will always keep you in ignorance. By no means so. For as you grow in spiritual stature, your wisdom will increase accordingly. Only I will not forcibly make you wise now. And this is from the book Bhagavan Sri Sathya Sai Baba, The Cosmic Energy. This quote tells us so much about Baba's unending love for each and every one of us, how tender that love is for each one of us. It gives us such an insight in the relationship between Baba and us. Spiritual transformation is a painful and slow process. The lessons are arduous, and they really have to sink in. But we must not forget that it's also a magnificent and wonderful process. And when we're feeling the pains of transformation, we can regain our strength with this quote. Baba says, "Children of immortality, remember that you're created in my image and likeness. Perfect. Live up to this image in all planes. Live like masters. Walk this earth with your heads held high, your spirit soaring, your hearts open to love, and believe in yourself and God within you. Then all will go well. See me everywhere. Talk to me and love me who is in each. Then from each I will respond and bring you into glory." And that's a quote that always cheers me up, no matter how painful spiritual transformation is. Baba's glory can sometimes be experienced in dreams, and so many of us have had Baba dreams, and often these dreams contain personalized messages for us where we receive his divine guidance. It's so important to remember Arjuna at that time and say, I'll do whatever you tell me to do. An example of this in my life was a Baba dream that I had in my early 30s, where Baba said to me, I have the perfect person for you to marry, and she's right here with me. It was a clear message, a clear command, and I knew at that point I was going to marry the person that God wanted me to marry. It was that simple. It turned out that the perfect person was a nurse working in Baba's super specialty hospital in Puttaparthi. And 2 years later, I was back in India for the world's first young adult conference. Baba made it, so I got row 1 to sit very close to him out of the 20,000 people that were sitting there waiting for his darshan. 2 weeks prior to the trip, a friend of mine who had been in Puttaparthi gave a letter to Baba, and the letter contained a sentence that read, "It would be very nice if Greg would marry my sister." 2 weeks later, there I was. I found myself in India in row 1, reaching my hands out to Baba with a small handwritten note saying, Baba, if you take this letter, it means that she's the perfect person and you want me to marry her. I was able to give that letter to Baba, which was a major first for me in regard to my physical interactions with Baba. And once the thrill of the interaction with Baba had subsided, I realized my promise. If you take this letter, I will marry her. So I did what God wanted me to do. And 20 years of happy marriage later, we are finding ourselves here in the householder stage of life, or the grihasta stage of life, as it's known in Sanskrit. This is a stage that most of us are in, which, by the way, you don't have to be married to be in. It's more defined by our age, roughly 30 to 60 years old. And there are steps that we can take to make this stage of life a wonderful journey, even though this too can be stressful with the material strains on life. We have to remind ourselves that there's always time for silence and introspection. Baba says, God has 1,000,000 names. Select any name of his, any name that appeals to you, and select any form. Every day when you awaken to the call of the brightening east, recite that name. Meditate on the form. Have the name and the form as your companion, guide and guardian throughout the toils of the waking hours. When you retire for the night, offer grateful homage to God in that form, with that name, for being with you, by you, beside you, before you, behind you, all day long. If you stick to this discipline, you cannot falter or fail. I mentioned that in the grihasta stage of life, there should always be a little bit of time for silence. And Baba says, silence is the beginning of the art of communication. Learn to live in silence for some moments every day. Just sit in complete silence and listen for the voice of God. You may not physically hear a voice because God can speak to you through the silence, and you will become aware of God's message even though you hear no voice. So let your mind rest in God in those moments of silence, and then the thoughts will come into your mind. I don't mean to say that my wife and I sit in silence all day, but silence is an important component in the overall scheme of things. Baba has said, "Be my friend and walk with me. Be my friend." Walking through the journey of life with God at one's side, what could be better than that? So what does it mean to be God's friend? What does that mean? I first learnt of this concept in the Sai Satyarita, where Shirdi Sai Baba points to a group of his close devotees and describes how each one of them had been his friend in earlier or previous lifetimes. He was my friend for one lifetime, and he was my friend for 3 lifetimes. That's how he went around the group, describing them all. And as a result of their friendship with God in earlier lifetimes, they deserve to be with an avatar in their present lives. Shirdi Sai Baba was the first incarnation of Sri Sathya Sai Baba. So being God's friend meant that they had dedicated their lives to serving others. In today's world, in the field of information technology, there is a term called remote hands. This term means that when you need to set up a computer or a server in a distant location, a professional will do the setup and configuration for you remotely, without you having to fly all the way out there personally. When it comes to Seva, I like to believe that with Baba's guidance and Baba's instructions, I'm the one providing the remote hands. When it comes to Seva, Baba says, man has to worship God in the form of man. God appears before him as a blind beggar, an idiot, a leper, a child, a decrepit old man, a criminal, or a madman. But you must see, even behind these veils, the divine embodiment of love, power, and wisdom, the Sai, and worship him through service. 20 years ago now, I asked Baba, I said, if you come in a dream, we'll start a Sai Baba Center. And Baba did. And things fell into place very, very quickly. Baba showed us the house. Beautiful pictures of Baba were given to us. Baba knew exactly where he wanted everything to go. It was as if the house had been built with the center in mind. Every day, 7 days a week, by 365 days a year, the strict discipline is followed of Shiva Rudram at 6 a.m., followed by prayers at 4:30 each afternoon. What seems a long time ago now, I had another Baba dream where I asked Baba, do you know what I'm thinking in my mind? Yes, I do, said Baba. That was the message. It was important for me at that time to confirm that every thought, even the fleeting ones, even the thoughts where words are not quite fully formed, where it's just a bit of an emotion, like, I don't know, I don't really like it, maybe I do. He knows it all. He knows them the instant we have them. He knows each and every one of us so well, so intimately well, which is why he says, always do your duty. He says that to each of us. Always do your duty. And so I'm going to close tonight with my all-time favorite quote, where Baba says, no matter where you go, always do your duty as you see it, and know that I will be there, inside you, guiding you every step of the way. In the years to come, you will experience me in many different manifestations of my form. You are my very own, dearer than dear to me. I will protect you like the eyelids protect the eye. You already have me, and I have you. I will never leave you, and you can never leave me. From this point on, do not hanker after anything. Do your duty with unwavering love, prema, seeing all as God. Be patient. In time, everything will be given to you. Be happy. There is no need to worry about anything. Whatever's experienced, whatever happens, know that this avatar, through his divine will, Sankalpa, has made it so. There is no force on earth which can delay the mission for which this avatar has come by even one instant. You are all sacred souls, and all have parts to play in the unfolding drama of the golden age which is sure to come. Sai Ram.